Namaste. Today's subject is the subject of forgiveness. And for many people, the subject of forgiveness is a difficult one because we see so much hurtfulness in the world. We see so many mistakes, we see so much suffering, and we feel that anybody who would inflict suffering on us or someone that we care about, they shouldn't do it. Makes us upset. And of course, there's another aspect of forgiveness, and that is to do with forgiving ourselves. If we make mistakes, we have to get past that mistake, otherwise we can't grow and move forward. Well, but if we don't forgive others, they can't do that either. So there's this dilemma. Should I or shouldn't I forgive? And in order to explore this subject properly, we should consult Swami Kriyananda. So let's do that.
Toward the end of the Master's life, he experienced a prolonged illness. One afternoon, when he had begun to come out of his quarters again, he was getting into his car. I and another monk were helping him. "You are getting better, sir," I exclaimed gratefully. Who was getting better? The Master's tone was impersonal. "I meant your body, sir." I knew, of course, that he had no attachment to it. To him, however, the very distinction was superficial. "What's the difference?" he asked. "The wave belongs entirely to the ocean from which it protrudes. This is God's body. If he wants to make it well, all right. If he wants to keep it unwell, all right. It is wisest to be impartial. If you have health but are attached to it, you will always be afraid of losing it. And if you fear that loss but become ill, you will suffer. Why not remain forever joyful in the self? Man's greatest problem is his ego, his consciousness of individuality. Whatever happens to him, he thinks it affects him personally. Why be affected? You are not this body, you are he. Everything is he. All is spirit. Unfortunately, mankind sees everything as separate and individual. The Lord had to create that appearance. Ask yourself, however, why? Why is this a tree and you a human being? The answer is simple. Without that variety, there would be no play. It wouldn't interest you. If people saw that there was only one essence in everything, painting all the scenes, directing all the action, and acting all the parts, they would quickly tire of it. For the show to go on, there has to be activity, interest. It all has to seem real. Hence this appearance of individuality. As long as man enjoys the play for its own sake, he will go on birth after birth, experiencing life's pleasures and pains. The Bhagavad Gita describes it as a wheel, constantly turning. To get off the wheel, you have to desire freedom very intensely. Then only will God release you. Your longing has to be fervent. If it is, and if you are determined no more to want to play, the Lord has to release you. He tries to keep you here with tests, but in his higher aspect, as the cosmic lover, he hates this show and wants you out of it. Why shouldn't he release you once he sees that you really want him alone, and not his show, that you want only freedom in him? The same essence, conscious life, is in you and in that tree over there. The tree, however, was put there, whereas some free will on your part made you who and what you are. Only the wise know just where the predestination ends and free will begins. Meanwhile, you must keep on doing your best according to your own clearest understanding. You must long for freedom as the drowning man longs for air. Without sincere longing, you will never find God. Desire Him above everything else. Desire Him that you may share Him with all. That is the greatest wish. And try, meanwhile, to rise above the pairs of opposites, pleasure and pain, heat and cold, sickness and health. Free yourself from the consciousness of individuality, of being separate from everyone and everything else. Keep your mind steadfastly fixed on Him. Remain inwardly as unaffected as the motionless spirit that you want to become. He alone is what you really are. His bliss alone is your true nature.
In the Bible it says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then it says, vengeance is the Lord's. You find in all great epics, and it appears that this is what makes an epic, is that there's conflict, there's troubles, there's action, and usually killing, and various other forms of discomfort. And most of us have grown up looking at life in such a way as that we feel that we are occasionally, if not often, treated unjustly. And because of that unjust treatment, we feel that someone is to blame. Usually, the person who inflicted it upon us. We don't think that maybe we're to blame. And we are a little unsure about whether or not we should blame God. Because God is, you don't want God to be upset with you. So, we most of us complain to God, but you're a little careful about how you complain. You don't want to overdo it. And one of the reasons that we find ourselves in this dilemma is because we are looking at it from the wrong point of view. It's a little bit like in some doors, there's the little peephole that you look through. And on one hand, the end on the inside is very small, but when you look through, it's larger. You can see much more outside. But if you look at the other way around, if you try to look in, you can't see too much. And the human experience is we're trying to look, we can't see too much. We can't really understand clearly what's going on. But there's a very logical way to understand forgiveness. It has to do, and you may have wondered, well, why did you play a video about suffering? And when we're talking about forgiveness. But it's because of suffering that we come up against. If you never suffered, what would I forgive you for not letting me suffer. No, I'm sorry. I'm happy all the time. I want to complain. Oh, I'll forgive you. No, you want to forgive people, or we find ourselves in that position of needing to forgive because something unpleasant has happened. So the root of the need to forgive and the reasons why we would think that we should or shouldn't forgive have to do with how much we suffer. If they really make us suffer hard, then I'm not forgiving you. But if it's not too bad, then we may, depending on how we feel and our general nature, well, okay, I'll forgive you for that. Well, this approach has a certain reaction in our consciousness. Because what is our consciousness doing when we don't forgive? And what is our conscious doing? What has our consciousness done to put us in a position where we may need to forgive, and that is that we've suffered. And the root of our circumstance is that we've allowed ourselves to suffer. And we say, well, what am I supposed to say? Yay, I'm so happy the food tastes bad. Yay, I'm so happy, I'm just blissful that the airplane crashed. You know, that defies human logic. At the same time, what does the Master say? The Master says, when one of the disciples got into trouble, and Master said, well, you will forgive me, won't you, sir? And Master says, what else can I do? Well, what do you mean, what else can you do? Well, when the Master speaks, who's talking? God, through a form. What is God? Omnipresent bliss, love, joy. So nothing in this world can take the Master out of love, bliss, and joy. So if the disciple makes a mistake, the Master's love, bliss, joy. If the world explodes, the Master is love, bliss, joy. So the reason that we feel the need to suffer and to decide whether we should forgive or not is because we are not experiencing love, bliss, joy. It's this simple. So when we think about what am I going to do, and the thing is, if we don't forgive, what do we lose? Love, whatever love, bliss, joy that we have, we've lost. Because how do we feel when we don't forgive? We feel anger. We feel frustration. We feel a disconnect. People don't say, I don't forgive you. That doesn't go together. I'm never going to forgive you forever. And I'm going to come back 1,000 times if I need to get you. And your family and your family's family. I mean, and that's... and so what we do is that we find ourselves in this situation and then we complain. We complain to God. Okay, that is a fair complaint because God made the creation. But it's not fair for us to say that we don't have an alternative. We have chosen to participate in the creation. We have chosen to become confused. Now we're choosing to be unconfused. Okay, we're choosing to remember our divine nature. So if we want to understand forgiveness, we have to root our inner perception of life on love, bliss, understanding. We begin to recognize that there's nothing in this world that can have the power to take our happiness away unless we give it that power. But the way to attain control over, because we give it up all the time, the way to gain control is to be practical. So let's think about being practical. If somebody does something to you that you think they shouldn't do, first, are we going to allow them to make us unhappy? Well, we're going to try not to. But then, are we going to be angry at them, or are we going to forgive them? Well, we have to choose. We're either going to stay angry and upset, or we're going to open our hearts and forgive. But are we going to forget? Are we going to really let it go? There's a saying, it goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. It says that I have to pay attention to the practical matters of life and recognize that if someone hurts me, I can forgive them. But do I really want to put them in a position to hurt me again? So if you're a shopkeeper, you have someone working at the register, you find out that they stole money. You can forgive them, or you fire them, you can, do whatever you want, but if you forgive them and allow them to stay, you recognize that they have this temptation. So you have to put things in place in order to protect yourself. So the money gets counted and accounted for every day, or maybe you move that person to a different position for some time until they earn your trust again. Earning your trust again is not the same as not forgiving them. You see, there's a practical side to this. I forgive my child for making a mistake, but I'm going to continue to train them not to make that mistake again. And so when we're looking at life, we have to realize that the spiritual life doesn't mean that you become blind to the difficulties around us and the mistakes that are being made. We can't just say, the government's decided not to come to work for the next month. No, that hey, government, come on. Let's, the cook decided not to show up today. Well, you don't have to be unhappy about it, but if the cook is not reliable, then you need a new cook. We have to be practical. But we don't tie our happiness, our sense of well-being, to the actions of others. But we are practical about minimizing the problems in life. One of our practical goals is to improve the world in which we live. It starts in here, improving our inner consciousness, and then bringing that positive perception out into every part of life. So, if you think about it, think about something that you harbor in your heart, because really forgiveness takes place in the heart. As long as there's any negative energy surrounding a situation, then we're tied to it. So I remember, if I think about one of the most difficult things, family. Having a serious problem with a relative, especially a parent or a child, and feeling that relationship has been so difficult that you find it very difficult to be at peace about it. And I remember my father and I had that kind of relationship, and as a teenager I was very rebellious, and I I feel bad that I did this, but I didn't feel bad at the time. I said to him one day, I said, "Dad, I hate your guts." We all can imagine a teenager who gets so fired up that they say something that they wish they hadn't said. And it took me some years many years really, to get past that. But eventually, through living the spiritual life, and my dad didn't change. He was grumpy till the day he died. But I changed. And I began to realize that I harbored this anger, this unacceptance of this consciousness that didn't allow him or others in a larger sense to be the way they are. So that's the issue, is are we going to allow the world to be the way it is? If we don't allow it to be that way, then we will harbor ill feelings, and our peace will be poisoned by those ill feelings. So it's not them hurting us, it's we hurting ourselves by allowing them to hurt us. So I had to get to this point where I could forgive the many, many, many things that I had built up inside myself that were saying, that I shouldn't forgive him. And finally one day I said it to him. I said, Dad, look, things haven't gone as well as we might have hoped, but I just want you to know that I love you. And in that open-hearted state, you free yourself from self-inflicted discomfort. Because if we walk around life thinking, you shouldn't be that way, that shouldn't be like this, you don't have the right to do that, if we look at life and just say, it's not the way that I want it to be, therefore therefore it should change in order for me to be happy, then we're walking down the road of unhappiness. That's pretty much guaranteed. So what I'm talking about is not easy. It's easy to intellectually say, okay, I should forgive everyone and everything for being the way it is. I should forgive God for making a world that's challenging. Okay. But we all get to a point sometimes that we feel compelled. And Swamiji made a very interesting point. He was talking about, at one point, about free will. How much free will, how much control can we have over ourselves? How much control can we take when we're at that point and the world is pushing our buttons and we're on the edge? And the truth is, we don't know. We know we have some. It could be this much, it could be this much. As we grow in spirit, our free will gets bigger and bigger. But what is free will? Free will is God consciousness. So the key to getting free will is to always turning towards God, always turning towards open-hearted connectedness to universal truth and love, joy, presence. This is the key. This is our number one automatic reaction that we should develop in ourselves. And one of the incredible things that we observed of Kriyanandaji over the years, that in fact, some people used to say that he walked with his heart first. As yogis, we're taught to stand straight and shoulders back. And Swamiji, you see pictures of yogis often. They're upright, and you could say yes, they have their shoulders back. But I like that. It says instead of saying it there, it says his heart first. No, that's not a naive heart. That's a strong heart. It's a heart that can absorb so many of the ups and downs of life. And this is just something that we have to consciously practice. It's something that we will find that certain things we can get past easily, and according to our natures, other things that we'll find more difficult. But if we always open our hearts and connect ourselves to spirit, and we can do that on deeper and deeper levels through our practice of meditation and devotion and service. All of these things that we do, they work on the whole system. But when you're washing the window, you wash the whole window, but some spots are a little harder to clean. Depending on our nature, we'll have spots that are a little bit harder to clean. So we have to forgive ourselves, but don't forget. Forgive yourself for your mistakes, but don't forget you have something to work on. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means, okay, I see what's going on here. Let me take a practical approach to dealing with it, but let me keep my heart open. And in that process, we will live in, as masters describe as superconscious living. We live connected to the most positive elements of life and yet we're also practical. We're able to blend those two, those two things that seem separate, but they are one. And that was another point that was made. The Master's reaction at one point was, who's suffering? There is only God. When we need to forgive, remember, God forgives, and we are a part of God. So when we express those God qualities, we will experience more fully those God qualities. And by expressing forgiveness and freeing ourselves from suffering, we will gain the ability to experience the most amount of love and bliss in all circumstances. And then our nature will be to share that with others. So when Gandhi was assassinated, he pranam. It's very wrong. You know, and when we can pranam to our life challenges, when we can say, oh, you really got me, namaskar, you know, then and begin to see that every little experience that we have in life is God saying, what you gonna do? And we have to say, I'm with you, Lord. And when we live with God in that way, we will be able to say at some point, as Master did say, will you forgive me? And he said, what else can I do? Namaste.